My dad told me I was no longer his daughter before he finished his second forkful of roast chicken. The way he said it was almost gentle, the way someone might comment on the weather while closing a window against a coming storm. He looked at me across my own dining table in my own paid-off house and calmly erased me. I remember thinking that my hands were not shaking. That surprised me. They should have. A sentence like that usually changes something in the body. Mine stayed still. Maybe stillness was the first sign that something in me had already broken, long before that night. Maybe this was only the moment the crack finally spoke out loud. The dinner itself had taken me hours to prepare. I had dusted the shelves, lit the good candle that smelled like bergamot in early summer, and arranged the plates in a way that made my small dining room in Charlotte feel like a full-grown home, instead of a third chance at adulthood. My house sat in the Dilworth neighborhood. Old trees and familiar sidewalks, the kind of place where people waved without expecting conversation. I bought it for that reason. I needed someplace that did not ask for anything from me. After working more than 80 hours a week for years, I finally had enough saved and enough discipline to buy it outright. No mortgage, no bank, no monthly reminder that rest was a luxury I could not afford. I had done that for myself. No one helped me. No one even asked how I was managing the double shifts and the weekends that disappeared like exhaled breath. They arrived almost on time. My mom stepped through the doorway with a bright smile that never reached her eyes. She commented on the smell of the candles and the shine of the floors and how the kitchen backsplash made the space feel expensive. My dad walked past her, giving the room a quick sweep with his gaze, the way someone might inspect a rental they were not sure matched the listing photos. My sister drifted in last, her hair perfect, her perfume sharp enough to cut through the air. She said the house looked good. Not great, not impressive, just good. I told her thank you anyway. We sat down to dinner, and for the first 15 minutes, everything behaved the way normal families behave. My mom asked about work. My sister commented on her upcoming plans to find her own place. My dad nodded at intervals, chewing in a rhythm that suggested tolerance more than enjoyment. I felt something in me unclench. Maybe it was wishful thinking. Maybe I believed that for once we could sit at a table without anyone needing something from me. Then my dad set his fork down. Not loudly, not with drama, just set it down and looked at me. He asked if it was true that the house was fully paid off. No lender, no debt. I said yes. I felt a small ribbon of pride unwinding in my chest. It lasted about 3 seconds. He leaned back, folded his hands, and delivered his verdict. That means you have unused capital. There are sentences that make sense only when spoken by certain people. Coming from my dad, it was not surprising. He had always viewed my life as a ledger to be managed, weighed, redistributed. My sister, on the other hand, was treated like a non-taxable exemption. She had burned through the $100,000 Grandma left her in less than a year. A trip to Miami, a new car that was too expensive for someone making her salary, meals at places where the servers wore pressed aprons and called her ma'am with, the kind of practiced warmth that taste tests as genuine until you see the final bill. My dad went on. My sister, he explained, was struggling to find a home in this market. Her income was too low to secure a loan. The banks had rules. Unfair ones, according to him. Since I had a stable job and a house paid in full, I should take a 100% loan against my house to buy a home for her. It would not be forever, he said, just until she could get on her feet. It was the responsible thing to do. The family-oriented thing. The daughter thing. My mom nodded in agreement, pressing her napkin to her lips in a gesture that looked thoughtful but carried the thin shine of expectation. My sister sat straighter, eyes hopeful, as if this was simply the natural order of things, as if I existed to fix every financial slip she made, as if my life were the safety net she was entitled to bounce on repeatedly, without consequence. I told them I was not comfortable putting my house at risk. My voice stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. I said I worked very hard to own it, that it was the first place I had ever had to myself, and that I wanted to keep it that way. My dad did not raise his voice. He rarely did. He just leaned forward slightly, his expression settling into the familiar mask of disappointment he had used on me since childhood. He said I was being selfish. He said refusing meant I did not care about my family. Then he said the line that should have cracked something inside me, but instead made everything sharper, clearer. almost mathematical. If you do not sign the loan, you are not my daughter. There it was, a clean cut, no tremor, no slip of the tongue. A sentence delivered with the ease of someone commenting on the weather. My mom looked away. My sister looked pleased. I looked at the wall behind them and wondered if the paint color was too light. I waited for anger to fill me. It did not. What I felt instead was a cold, steady certainty. A click, like a lock turning. Something inside me settled into place. I told him no problem. If my sister needed a house, she could have mine. I would move out, find a new place, and make the transition easy for everyone. I said it calmly, almost casually, as if I were agreeing to rearrange a weekend plan. And not a single person at that table questioned how quickly I gave up the home I had worked years to build. My dad looked satisfied. My mom sighed with relief. My sister, a small private smile that reminded me of all the time she had taken something from me and assumed I would recover. I did not correct them. I let them. When dinner ended and they walked out the door, my mom said she was proud of me for finally understanding what family meant. My dad patted my shoulder. My sister kissed my cheek and whispered that she already knew how she wanted to decorate her new living room. I stood in the hallway for a long time after the door closed, listening to the soft tick of the dining room clock. My house felt different. Not smaller, not empty, just clearer. Later that night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, I realized something important. There are families where love is unconditional, families where you are safe simply because you exist. Then there where love is a contract you never signed, but are punished for not fulfilling. I had spent my entire life paying interest on a loan I never agreed to take. That night, for the first time, I stopped. I did not decide on revenge. Not yet. I only knew I would not let them strip away the one thing I had built for myself. I just would not give her mine. Everything that came afterward began with that single thought, as simple and quiet as a breath. I got up, washed my cup, dried it carefully, and placed it back on the shelf. Then I turned off the light and went upstairs to bed, knowing that whatever came next would not break me. It might even set me free. That is where the real story begins. The morning after that dinner, I woke up before sunrise, the room still dim, the air cool enough that I pulled the comforter tighter around my shoulders. For a few seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then the memory settled over me with the weight of something permanent. My dad's voice, flat and certain. You are not my daughter. It should have split me open. Instead, it clarified everything, like a lens snapping into focus. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of traffic on East Boulevard, and I felt an old truth return to me. This was never about love. It was about expectation. It was about the role they had written for me long before I understood how to say no. I got up and padded to the kitchen, bare feet on cool hardwood floors. The house was quiet, in the way a house is quiet only when it belongs to you, alone. I made coffee, watching the dark liquid rise in the pot. The rhythmic drip almost meditative. That was when the past began pressing its way forward again, not as a flood, but as a sequence of clean, sharp moments. It had been 2 years since Grandma passed. I remember the phone call from the county office, the formal tone of the representative, the request for my presence at the reading of her will. I remember sitting in that small conference room with my mom, my dad, and my sister, the air smelling faintly of carpet cleaner and someone's too strong cologne. Grandma left each of us $100,000. Evenly. No qualifiers. No hidden stipulations. My mom cried. My dad nodded, already calculating, I could tell. My sister gasped like someone had offered her a winning lottery ticket. I sat there stunned by the fact that for the first time in my life, something of value had been handed to me without strings. My grandma had always been that way. Quiet generosity, thoughtful fairness. When she gave you something, it came clean. 3 months later, my sister had used most of her inheritance. A trip to Los Angeles, a new wardrobe, a silver convertible she bought impulsively after test driving it for all of 10 minutes. She said the car made her feel alive. I remember nodding politely, pretending I did not feel a small ache watching her spend so freely on things that would depreciate before the ink dried on her purchase agreement. She liked to joke that money was meant to be enjoyed. My dad would beam when she said it, calling her spirited, calling her full of life. When I used my inheritance, there were no such smiles. I put every dollar into paying off student loans and into my savings. I worked double shifts. I skipped weekends. I ran spreadsheets to calculate how much faster I could pay off debt if I picked up 3 extra hours on Tuesdays and 4 more on Sundays. My dad said I was too uptight. My mom said I should enjoy myself more. My sister laughed and told me I acted like I was 40 years older than I was. I wanted to say that stability was my version of enjoyment. That paid bill was my vacation. That silence in a room I did not have to share was luxury. Instead, I said nothing, because saying nothing had become second nature. The truth is, I understood early that what I needed and what my family valued never matched. I grew up in a household where appearances mattered more than practicality. My sister was praised for her spontaneity, her charm, her effortless ability to draw attention. I was praised only when my discipline benefited them. When I took extra shifts to help with grocery bills during college, I was responsible. When I saved money instead of joining my sister on lavish trips, I was uptight. When I paid off my loans early, I was told I should learn to relax. Every wise choice I made was interpreted as proof I owed them more. That pattern was not loud. It was quiet, the way erosion is quiet. Small bits wear away until the shape of your life looks nothing like what you found intended. The afternoon after Grandma's will was read, my sister invited me to lunch. She chose a trendy cafe in uptown Charlotte, the kind with exposed brick and tiny pots of succulents on every table. She looked radiant, laughing as she told me how she planned to redo her entire apartment. She talked about a vacation she wanted to take, a photography course she would enroll in, and the new bag she had already ordered online. Then she asked how I would spend mine. I said I wanted to pay down my debt. Her smile faltered. She called me dramatic and said money was meant to be enjoyed. I asked why stability could not be enjoyed. She waved her hand and said stability was boring. That was the moment I realized we had been raised in the same house, but in 2 different worlds. By the time a year passed, she was back to living paycheck to paycheck. The convertible needed repairs she could not afford. The designer bags no longer felt exciting. The photos from her trip to Los Angeles were buried among 1,000 others on her social media. She came to me asking for help with her rent twice. I helped once. The second time, I said I could not. She cried. My mom called me cold. My dad said I had forgotten what family meant. What none of them ever asked was how I managed, how many hours I worked, how lonely it felt to always be the sensible one, how much fear lived in the pit of my stomach every time an unexpected expense appeared. They did not ask because they assumed I was fine. And maybe that was my fault, because I had grown so good at being fine that I no longer knew how to show anything else. When I finally bought the house in Dilworth, it took everything I had. Years of discipline. Years of telling myself that one day it would be worth it. Walking through that front door for the first time, keys in hand, the light pouring in through the living room windows, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Safety. Not the kind given by people, but the kind built brick by brick with your own tired hands. I told my parents once that I had paid it off early. My dad barely looked up from his phone when I said it. He murmured something about smart decisions and then asked if I had thought about using the equity to invest in something bigger. A rental property, maybe. Something that could generate income for the family. For the family, not for me. Not once did he say he was proud. Not once did he ask how I managed to do it. That memory hit me again the morning after dinner. As I sipped my cooling coffee, I realized his reaction made perfect sense. In his mind, my financial independence did not make me secure. It made me available. It made me a resource, a container to be emptied and refilled as needed. That was when the truth settled in my chest with a clarity that felt almost peaceful. With my dad, my stability did not earn respect. It created opportunity. For them, not for me. I sat there thinking about my sister's face at the dinner table, the way she brightened at the idea of stepping into a home I had worked myself, raw, to earn. There had been no shame in her expression, no hesitation. Just expectation. It was the same expression she had when Grandma's inheritance was announced. The same expression she had when she showed off her new convertible. The same expression she wore whenever she believed life would provide for her, simply because she wanted it to. And then my dad's voice echoed again in my mind. Unused capital. He did not see my house as an achievement. He saw it as leverage. I felt something inside me shift. A quiet click, like a safe unlocking. Not anger, not grief, just understanding. A simple, factual understanding of where I truly stood in the architecture of my family. Not as a daughter to be cherished, but as an asset to be accessed. The realization was strangely freeing. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug under warm water. Outside, the early sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees lining the street. I watched it for a moment, letting the hush of the neighborhood steady me. Then I dried my hands and set the mug back in its place. Maybe this was the moment when the blueprint of my life finally shifted. When the load-bearing walls I had been holding up since childhood began to crack just enough to let something new come through. I was not their daughter in the way daughters hope to be loved. I was their safety net, their contingency plan, their quiet answer to every crisis of their own making. And now that I finally understood that, the decision I needed to make next became clearer than anything I had ever found done before. I closed the door behind me and stood in the quiet entryway. The house seemed to hold its breath with me, as if waiting for whatever would come next. I remember thinking that this should feel dramatic, like the opening salvo in a war. Instead, it felt practical, necessary, almost mundane. Like finally fixing a hinge you have ignored for too long. The next morning began with my mom calling again. It was 7:40 in the morning, earlier than she usually risked contacting me. Her voice was bright in that rehearsed way she used when pretending nothing was wrong. She asked how I slept. She asked if I had thought about furniture arrangements for my sister. Then she pivoted back into the familiar refrain. Family helps family. I could hear plates clinking in the background, like she was tidying the kitchen while reciting a script. She said my compliance had eased her worries. She said she and my dad had talked late into the night and felt relieved that I was stepping up as the stable one. That phrase again, the stable one. It landed like a small pebble in the well of my stomach. I listened without interrupting, folding a dish towel as she spoke. When she paused for breath, I said the same sentence I had committed to the night before. No problem. I will make sure she gets the house quickly. The silence that followed was soft, satisfied. My mom exhaled, long and warm. I knew that sound. It was the sound of someone settling back into their preferred version of reality. She made a few more comments about wallpaper and paint colors before letting me go. When the call ended, I stayed still for a moment, watching the slow movement of light across the hardwood floor. My shadow looked unfamiliar in the morning haze, like someone else entirely. At 8:15, my sister texted. She sent a picture she had taken in my living room the night before, the sunlight pouring across the floors, catching the edges of the coffee table. Under it, she wrote that she could already see herself living there. A second message followed. This house is perfect, so much better than anything I have toured. Then a third one. The location is amazing. And the kitchen. Oh my God, the kitchen. I typed back the same words. No problem. I will make sure you get the house quickly. She sent back a heart and a string of glittering emojis. I stared at the phone for several seconds before setting it face down again. By 9, my dad called. I watched the screen light up and go dark 3 times. He did not leave a voicemail, which was exactly what I expected. My dad did not believe in asking politely for things he thought were owed to him. He believed in pressure applied through tone, silence, and expectation. I let every call ring out. He would interpret that silence however he wanted. I already knew what I needed to do. By 10, I had switched into planning mode. Lists helped. They always had. I grabbed a legal pad and started writing. Boxes, donations, address change, notify the bank, even though the house was fully paid off. Pack sentimental items first. Leave bulky things for last. Call a moving company. Book a storage unit in South End or Plaza Midwood. Then I wrote the biggest item in small, neat letters. Contact attorney. I already knew which one. 2 years earlier, I had needed legal help for a minor contract issue. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic. The attorney's efficiency had impressed me. He had spoken in clipped sentences, asked only necessary questions, and handled the issue quietly. He had no interest in my personal life, which made him perfect for this moment. The call lasted under 12 minutes. He said expedited closings were possible with a cash buyer. When he asked if I required discretion, I said yes. He paused, then said he understood. He would begin preparing documents for review. His tone carried no curiosity, no judgment, only forward motion. When we hung up, I felt something in my chest unspool. Not relief exactly, more like alignment, as if all the pieces of my life, scattered for years, were finally arranging themselves into something coherent. By late morning, I moved from planning into action. I began opening drawers, cabinets, closets, touching everything I owned as if reacquainting myself with what was truly mine. The junk drawer was first. Spare keys, pens that no longer worked, a takeout menu from a place that had closed 2 years ago, 2 mismatched chargers. I sorted, tossed, organized. The small, rhythmic work settled my nerves. Next came the cabinet with important documents, renovation receipts from when I had redone the kitchen, insurance papers, repair invoices, the folder that held my closing documents from when I bought the house. I laid everything on the dining table and worked through each page slowly, my handwriting in margins, notes I had forgotten making. The memory of each sacrifice is embedded in ink and paper. By the time I finished arranging what my attorney would need, the sun had shifted across the floor, warming the dining table. My living room looked exactly as it had the day I moved in, clean, quiet, full of potential. I pressed my palm against the envelope of documents again, feeling the slight texture of the paper. Oddly enough, it reminded me of the feeling I used to get after taking an exam. Prepared. Forward moving. Certain. At 1 p.m, I called my mom again. My voice stayed level. I told her I would need 2 weeks to move out. She made a surprised sound, something between approval and impatience. 2 weeks is fine, she said. She sounded genuinely cheerful, like someone who believed everything was falling neatly into place. She asked if I needed help packing. I said no. I would handle everything. The moment the call ended, I exhaled. 2 weeks. That was the time I had granted them. 2 weeks during which they would imagine themselves stepping into my house, believing it had been rearranged to fit their vision. 2 weeks for me to complete the quiet work happening beneath the surface. Around mid-afternoon, I stepped outside for air. The Dilworth neighborhood was calm, as it always was. Well-kept lawns, people walking their dogs, a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of cut grass. I walked up the block and back, letting the routine of movement clear the static in my mind. Every step felt like a reminder that what I was doing was not anger. It was a boundary. Back inside, I returned to packing. A few books, winter clothing, old photos I had tucked away in a shoebox. I found one of me and my sister at a county fair when we were children, her smiling wide, cotton candy in hand, me standing slightly behind, half smiling, half wary of the camera. I studied that picture for a long time, trying to understand the distance that had always existed between us. I slipped the photograph back into the box without closing it. At 5 p.m, my sister texted again. She asked if I could measure the living room so she could start planning her furniture arrangement. She added a request for photos of the bedrooms. I typed back another simple reply. I will handle everything, no problem. The phrase felt less like communication and more like punctuation by now. She responded with several excited emojis. I ignored them as gently as possible. As evening approached, I carried the envelope to my car. The air was warm, with a faint humidity that hinted at rain later. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, letting the quiet of the neighborhood settle around me. Porch lights flickered on up and down the street. A couple walked past, deep in a conversation that seemed to belong to a different universe entirely. I drove to the attorney's office. The sky had turned a soft lavender, the kind that makes everything look briefly cinematic. I slipped the envelope through the secure slot, listening for the muffled sound of it landing inside. It was a small sound, almost insignificant, and yet it marked the precise moment the plan became real. When I returned home, the house felt different again. Not in a sad way, more like a place that understood it was preparing to let go. I turned on one lamp in the living room, enough to cast a warm pool of light over the coffee table and couch. I sat there for a long time, feeling the quiet thrum around me. My phone buzzed on the table. A brief vibration. I did not check it. I had a sense it was my dad calling again. Or maybe my mom with a list of suggestions for my sister's future decor. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and let the soft sounds of the house fill the silence. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the slight settling of the floorboards, the comfortable stillness of a home that had held me, if only for a little while. Some moments come with clarity. Others arrive slowly, like a tide. This one came with certainty. No problem had never been surrendered. It had been the first honest thing I had said to my family in years. I stood up, walked through each room one more time, then turned off the lights. The house settled into darkness gently, as if agreeing with what was coming next. 2 weeks. That was the time I had given everyone, including myself. Soon enough, the future they thought they controlled would shift beneath them. And for once, I would not be the one absorbing the impact. I woke up before my alarm the next morning, the kind of waking where your body rises before your mind decides whether it is ready. The house was still in that quiet half-darkness, the kind that makes everything look softer. I walked barefoot through the hallway, my fingers trailing along the wall out of habit. 2 weeks. The words followed me like a shadow. 2 weeks for them to believe they were moving in. 2 weeks for me to make sure they were not. By 8 in the morning, I had already packed half the kitchen into cardboard boxes, not sealed, just staged. There was something oddly calming about wrapping plates in newspaper, the crinkle of it grounding me in a way few things had lately. I made coffee and carried the mug to the back porch, letting the warm steam hit my face. That was when my phone lit up with a name I had not seen in years. Mark. We had gone to school together briefly, then drifted apart, the way people do when life pushes them into different orbits. I remembered him as quiet, thoughtful, someone who laughed more with his eyes than his mouth. I answered out of instinct rather than intention. He was calling from Tech Valley, he said. Work had transferred him there a few months ago. He sounded exhausted in that specific way people sound when they have spent too many months looking for housing in an impossible market. He told me he had been renting short-term places, moving every few weeks, hoping to land something permanent. Every house he toured had 10 buyers lined up behind him. He sounded tired of pretending it did not matter. I listened. It felt natural, safe. A conversation detached from everything happening in my own life. He asked how I was. I told him I was in the middle of packing. He assumed it was because I had found a better place. I did not correct him. Letting people believe comfortable things is easier sometimes. He asked what the housing market in Charlotte was like these days. I told him Dilworth was still competitive, that renovated properties were going quickly, sometimes without inspection, contingencies. He made a low sound in his throat, the kind that mixes surprise with resignation. He said something that made me pause. He said he wished he could find someone selling a house directly, someone willing to close quickly, someone who did not want to go through the full spectacle of the market. He said cash buyers often had an edge, but even then it was hard, because every seller had 10 offers on the table before he could blink. I walked back inside and stood in the middle of my kitchen, my hand resting on the back of a dining chair. The house smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner from the night before. Sunlight cut across the countertops in clean lines. I listened to him breathe on the other end of the call, the quiet static of someone waiting without pressing. Then I heard myself ask the question before I had fully decided why I was asking it. Can you buy cash if the house is right? There was a brief silence. Then he said yes, if it is the right house. If the closing can happen quickly. If the seller knows what they want and does not waver. He said he could waive inspection if needed. He trusted his own eye for structure, he said. He had bought property before. I looked around my kitchen again. The soft blue paint, the counters I had chosen after spending hours comparing samples, the brand new stove that still looked showroom ready. I walked to the living room, my socks whispering against the hardwood. The morning light spilled through the windows, touching everything like a goodbye that had not been spoken aloud yet. I felt no panic, no resistance, no grief. What I felt instead was an opening, a clean, wide opening. I told him I might know someone selling. Someone who wanted things handled quietly. Someone who did not want the spectacle. He said he was listening. I gave him a brief description of the house, not too detailed, not too emotional, just the facts. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Renovated kitchen, hardwood throughout, large yard for a Charlotte neighborhood. Natural light in almost every room. He asked if he could see it. Not in a desperate way, in a grounded way. The way someone stands at the edge of a decision and waits for the ground to shift beneath them. I told him I needed to check something first and that I would call him back. After we hung up, I walked down the hallway slowly, turning my head toward each room. The guest bedroom, the office, my own room with the bed neatly made, pillows fluffed, everything in its place, everything radiating a sense of achievement I had earned entirely alone. I touched the door frame lightly, the paint smooth under my fingers. I remembered the day I finished painting it. I had worked a long shift and still came home to lay down painter's tape, to run the brush in long strokes, to clean the edges carefully. I had done that alone too. Not one person from my family had asked how the renovation was going. They only commented afterward on how upscale the house looked for someone my age. A compliment wrapped in dismissal. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my elbows resting on my knees. Revenge did not cross my mind, not even vaguely. My sister did not enter the picture. Neither did my parents. For a moment, none of them existed at all. What existed was a simple truth. This house was mine. I had earned it. And because of that, only I would decide what happened to it. Not my dad with his talk about unused capital. Not my mom with her family helps family mantra. Not my sister with her bright smile imagining herself in my living room. Me, only me. Some decisions arrive like lightning. Fast, blinding, electrifying. This one arrived like dusk. Gradual, inevitable, a gathering of shadows until the night settled fully and quietly. I walked into the kitchen again, opened the cabinet under the sink, and pulled out the small toolbox I kept there. Inside was the measuring tape I had used during all the renovations. I picked it up out of habit rather than purpose. The metal felt warm in my hand, familiar. Then I looked up and took in the full sweep of the room, the lines I had painted. The utensils are arranged neatly. The plants on the windowsill are thriving in the morning light. I realized that letting my family take this place would be like handing them my spine. Not just the structure, but the strength that held everything upright. I loosened my grip on the measuring tape. It fell softly into the toolbox. Yes, I would sell the house. The decision settled into me with such certainty that the air felt different, like the moment before the first drop of rain after a long dry spell. It was not anger. It was an alignment, the outcome of years of holding myself steady against expectations that never belonged to me. I called Mark back. He picked up quickly. I could hear background noise, maybe a street, maybe an office. His voice steadied as soon as he said hello. I told him I was willing to show him the house. He asked how soon. His voice held a cautious optimism, the kind people use when they do not want to jinx possibility. I said today if he was free. He said he could be here by late afternoon. He asked if that worked. I said it did. When I ended the call, I stood very still in the middle of the living room. I looked at the framed photos on the wall. Not many of my family, mostly landscapes, sunsets, a picture of the Blue Ridge Mountains I had taken during a rare weekend off. These were the pieces of myself that had never required permission. I could take them with me. The hours before he arrived passed quietly. I dusted surfaces. Not out of obligation, but out of ritual. I watered the spider plant in the corner, straightened a stack of books on the coffee table. I was not preparing for a buyer. I was preparing for a transition. Around 4, my phone buzzed. I stepped outside to meet him. He stood on the walkway wearing a simple button-down, jeans, and a look of genuine appreciation. He took in the street, the trees, the well-kept lawns. He said it felt peaceful. I nodded. Inside, he moved slowly, taking in each room thoughtfully, not the way some potential buyers rush through a house as if racing time. He paused often. Note the quality of the flooring, the renovated kitchen, the natural light. He asked practical questions. How old is the roof? When was the HVAC serviced? Are there any known issues with plumbing or electrical? I answered each one calmly. Factually. Nothing about the interaction felt performative. He was not trying to sell me on him as a buyer. I was not trying to sell him the house. It was simply two people assessing a possibility. When he finished walking through the home, he turned to face me in the hallway. His expression was steady, thoughtful. He said if I truly intended to sell, he was prepared to offer cash. He said he could close quickly. He said he trusted the quality of the renovation and was willing to waive inspection. The silence that followed did not feel heavy. It felt precise. I looked past him down the hallway, at the rooms I had painted, the floors I had polished, the air that had held my quiet grief and my quiet hope. I expected a pang of loss. It did not come. What came instead was a slow, steady exhale. I told him I would contact my attorney to begin the process. He nodded, almost relieved. He thanked me for showing him the house. I walked him back to the front door, watching through the window as he pulled away. When I closed the door behind me, I placed my hand on the wood for a moment, feeling the cool surface. This house had been my sanctuary, my proof of what I could build without anyone's help. And now it would be something else. Not a burden. Not a bargaining chip. Not a financial tool for my family to manipulate. It would be my way out. I stepped back, let my hand fall to my side, and turned toward the living room. The late afternoon light was beginning to soften, spreading gold across the floorboards. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to freedom moving through the air. It was quiet, but it was unmistakable. I drove away without looking back, and for a few minutes, the silence inside the car felt almost foreign. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. My breathing stayed even. I kept waiting for the emotional backlash that people talk about when they walk away from something meaningful. But nothing rushed in. Nothing crashed over me. Everything stayed unnervingly calm. By the time I reached my temporary apartment on East Boulevard, the decision had settled into my body like a weight I had finally put down. I unlocked the door, set my keys on the counter, and pulled out my laptop. There was no hesitation left. No second guessing. Just the next step. I emailed Janet, my attorney, at 8:30 in the morning. The message was simple. The buyer is confirmed. Ready to proceed. She responded within 20 minutes, attaching preliminary documents that needed my signature. The speed comforted me. Clean transactions always move quickly, she had said once. This was the cleanest decision I had made in years. She called me shortly after to go over everything. Her voice was steady, unhurried, the kind of voice that made legal terms feel less intimidating. She explained escrow timelines, cash purchase logistics, the waiver of inspection, and the benefit of having a recently renovated property. She reminded me that cash offers avoided the delays caused by lenders. She sounded almost pleased at how straightforward this one would be. While she talked, I paced across the apartment's tiny living room, the carpet muffling my steps. The rooms felt nothing like the home I had just left. They were bare, temporary, lacking any sign of who I was. Somehow that helped. It made the transition feel like a corridor instead of a cliff. By noon, she had opened escrow and sent me a confirmation email with a digital signature request. I clicked through each page slowly, reading every line even though most of it was familiar. My previous purchase had trained me well. Responsibilities, conditions, transfer of ownership, recorded deed, wire instructions for the buyer, expedited closing. Each signature felt like I was cutting one more thread connecting my family to something that had never belonged to them. I had barely closed my laptop when my phone lit up with a message from my dad. "How is packing going?" No question mark. He never used question marks. It always made everything sound less like a question and more like a command. I typed back just fine. He replied immediately. "Do not leave a mess. Your sister should not have to clean up after you." I stared at the message long enough for the screen to dim. 2 minutes later, my sister sent a picture. A bright moving truck parked in front of what looked like the place she was renting now. She added a short caption. "Getting ready." The enthusiasm in those 2 words was almost childlike. She followed it with a photo of new towels she bought, folded in pastel colors, then a picture of a candle labeled morning linen. She was already building a life in a house she assumed would be hers. She texted again. "I cannot believe how lucky I am." Lucky was not the word I would have chosen. I put the phone face down on the counter and let the silence settle again. The next few days fell into a rhythm that surprised me in its simplicity. Wake up early, review documents, pack a few boxes, answer occasional emails from Janet, ignore most messages from my family, eat leftovers, Sleep lightly. There is something oddly cleansing about packing your belongings in a space that is no longer really yours. I moved through the house like a visitor, cataloging memories. I folded clothes into neat stacks, keeping only the pieces that felt like they belonged to the next version of me. I wrapped my few decorative items in bubble wrap. Framed prints, a small ceramic bowl I had bought at a craft fair in Asheville, a lamp with a warm glow that had always made evenings softer. When I came across the small wooden box my grandma had given me, I paused. It felt heavier than I remembered. Inside were tiny objects she had always insisted carried history. A pressed flower from her garden years before. A picture of her holding me during my 3rd birthday party. A tiny charm shaped like a seashell that she said reminded her of joy. I sat with the box for several minutes, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet. Some items hold more than memory. They hold identity. I put the box carefully into my suitcase. Meanwhile, escrow moved forward at a pace that would have impressed even the most demanding buyer. Each day brought a new confirmation. Title search clear. Documents reviewed. Release form signed. Funds prepared. Mark responded to every email from Janet within an hour. He kept his questions concise and never pushed for anything. He trusted the process. That trust smoothed everything. 2 mornings after the escrow opened, I woke early and checked my bank account. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I tapped. When the balance appeared, I blinked. The number stared back at me, solid and undeniable. Funds received. Full amount. I sat down slowly on the edge of the mattress in the empty bedroom. I waited for something to rise in me. Relief, fear, excitement. What came was steadier than all of them. Certainty. I was financially untouchable now. My dad could lecture, scold, pressure, or guilt, but none of that could reach me through the barrier that number created. An email arrived seconds later. Final documents attached. Recorded with the county. Official. Done. Later that afternoon, my dad texted again. You need to be out sooner if possible. Your sister wants to schedule furniture delivery. I read it twice, wondering if he realized he was giving orders to someone who no longer lived under his control. I responded simply. 2 weeks. That was the agreement. He did not reply. My sister, however, sent a stream of excited messages. Photos of rugs, photos of mugs, a picture of herself standing inside the moving truck, smiling as if she were posing for a magazine cover. She said she had already told her friends she was inheriting my house. She had used that word, inheriting. I put the phone down before I said something that could not be unsaid. As the closing date approached, I made my final trips to the house. I collected the last of my belongings, walking through each room with the detached air of someone completing inventory. I checked the cabinets one more time. The drawers, the closets, the attic. Not because I was sentimental, because I wanted to leave nothing behind for my family to twist into a narrative that suited them. One evening, right before sunset, I stood in the living room for the last time. The air was still. The shadows stretched long across the floorboards. This was the room where I had eaten my first dinner alone after buying them. House, legs tucked under me on the couch, feeling the weight of accomplishment in my chest. It was also the room where I had stood during that dinner with my family, listening to my dad tell me that I was not his daughter if I refused to take a loan for my sister. 2 versions of myself lived inside these walls. One was proud. One was stunned. Both were walking out the door now. I turned off each light, one by one. The house dimmed around me. I ran my fingers along the smooth paint of the hallway one last time. There was no ache, no grief, just air passing through a place that no longer held me. I stepped outside and pulled the door closed. The lock clicked with a clean, final sound. I rested my hand on the cool metal for a moment. Something inside me loosened. This house had once been a symbol of everything I had worked for. Later, it became evidence of how quickly my family felt entitled to anything I achieved. And now it was simply a completed chapter. A house cannot trap you unless you let the hands around it tighten. I walked down the front steps, keys in my fist. The sky above Dilworth glowed a muted orange, the kind of light that softened everything it touched. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A sprinkler clicked in rhythm across the street. At the curb, I opened my car door and slid inside. I placed the keys on the passenger seat. I did not look back. Not because I was avoiding emotion, because the house was no longer a point of gravity. It had no pull. As I started the engine, a thought moved through me with the clarity of glass. The house could never be used against me now. It could not be taken, claimed, demanded, guilt-woven, manipulated. It was gone from their reach, gone from their vocabulary, gone from their leverage. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt the unmistakable sensation of doors opening, not closing. I drove away without checking the rearview mirror. It no longer mattered what was behind me. The house was sold, and with it, a lifetime of being their safety net finally ended. 2 days later after the house sold, on a bright Saturday morning thick with Carolina humidity, my family pulled onto Maple Crest Drive with the confidence of people stepping into what they believed already belonged to them. I was not there, of course. I was miles away, drinking coffee from a paper cup in the quiet of my small apartment. But I would learn every detail later. Neighbors talk. People notice things, especially scenes loud enough to rattle a peaceful street. My dad arrived first, parking his silver sedan directly in front of the walkway as if positioning himself for a ceremonial handoff. My mom sat in the passenger seat with her shoulders pulled back, her sunglasses pushed high on the bridge of her nose. She had dressed for the occasion as though this day marked some family milestone. A floral blouse, pressed slacks. Her hair is fixed in soft curls, the kind of look she saved for graduations and church services. My sister followed behind them in her compact SUV, the trunk stuffed so full the latch barely clicked shut. A moving truck trailed in last, its engine humming as the driver waited for instructions. The men inside leaned forward, curious but patient, used to families with complicated dynamics and last-minute changes of heart. My dad climbed out first, stretching his shoulders as if he were preparing to take ownership of them. Entire street. He looked up at the house with satisfaction, nodding with an expression that could have passed for pride. My mom stepped out more delicately, smoothing her blouse, her eyes sweeping across the porch as though she were already imagining her grandchildren running there someday. My sister lingered near her car, her expression bright, hopeful, almost breathless. She clutched a set of decorative throw pillows against her chest, as if that made everything feel more real. They expected me to appear any moment with the keys. They expected gratitude, maybe an apology for taking so long to hand things over. They expected the story to unfold exactly as they had written it in their home minds. Instead, the front door opened. A woman stood there. Older, gracefully aged. Her gray hair was pinned neatly at the back of her head, and she wore a soft blue blouse tucked into linen pants. Her posture was straight, confident without arrogance. She looked like someone who had spent her entire life speaking to people, kindly but firmly. My mom blinked, taken off guard. My dad stepped forward, frowning. The woman greeted them in a calm voice. "Good morning. Can I help you?" My dad straightened. "Yes, we are here for the walkthrough. My daughter is giving this house to her sister. We are moving her in today." There was a pause, a quiet settling, the way dust hangs in the air before drifting down. The woman folded her hands gently. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. This house was sold not long ago. It belongs to my son now." The words did not come out harsh. They came out matter of fact, the way someone states the temperature or the time of day. But in that one sentence, the fantasy my family had built cracked. My mom stared at her. "I am sorry, what did you just say?" The woman met her eyes kindly. "This house was sold to my son. He completed the purchase recently." Shock is usually quiet at first. Then it grows teeth. My dad took a step forward. "No, that is impossible. This house belongs to my daughter. She gave it to her sister. We have the moving truck here. We were told she would be moving out this week." The woman raised her eyebrows slightly as if absorbing information she had not asked for. "I understand this is surprising, but the sale was finalized. The deed was recorded. I live here with my son until his permanent move-in date." My mom let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a scoff. A brittle edge coated her words. No, there is some mistake. Sarah would never sell this house. She would never do that to her sister." The woman clasped her hands a little tighter. "I cannot speak for your daughter's choices. I can only confirm that the property legally belongs to my son." My sister finally stepped forward, her mouth opening and closing like she needed air. "That cannot be true," Sarah promised. She said she would give it to me. This is my house. The woman looked at her with genuine sympathy. I am sorry, but it is not. My dad's voice sharpened into something cold. We need to see the paperwork. Right now. We need to speak to your son. We were promised this property. The woman's calm held. Her gaze did not shift. Promised by whom? My mom gestured wildly, her bracelets clinking. Promised by our daughter. She told us she would move out and let her sister have the house. We have everything arranged. The movers are here. She told us it was ours. The woman inhaled softly. My son completed a cash purchase. He has the deed. There is no ambiguity. And then it happened. The part people would later recount to me with lowered voices and raised eyebrows. The moment entitlement replaced confusion. My dad stepped closer, too close. His finger lifted as if the woman owed him something. This is fraud. Do you understand me? Fraud. That girl has tricked us. And you are helping her. This is illegal. We will call the police. The woman did not back up. She simply shifted her weight, bracing. Sir, you are standing on private property. You do not have the right to enter. My mom snapped back immediately. We have every right. This house was supposed to be our daughter's. She sacrificed herself for this family for years. She owes us. This woman you see here was supposed to give this house to her sister. We drove all the way out here with furniture and movers because she made a promise, and she will honor it. The woman blinked slowly. I see, but legally, the property is not hers anymore. She has no claim here, and neither do you. My dad shoved his hand against the door frame as the woman attempted to close the door. Wait, do not shut us out. You had no right to buy this house from her. She is not mentally stable when it comes to family matters. She gets confused. You clearly took advantage of her. That line alone would have made the neighbors talk for weeks. The woman's expression did not change, though her voice cooled a fraction. I assure you, I have done nothing inappropriate. My son handled the sale directly with her attorney. Everything was transparent and above board. My sister finally found words again, though they trembled. Call Sarah right now. I want to hear her say she betrayed us. She owes me this. She owes us this. The woman shook her head gently. I am not calling anyone. And unless you have lawful business here, you need to leave the porch. My mom let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You think you can ask us to leave? We are a rightful family, not you. You're just renting or squatting or whatever the situation is. We know our daughter. She would never sell this house. That was the moment the neighbor across the street stepped onto her lawn, pretending to check her mailbox while clearly watching everything unfold. Then another neighbor opened his garage door and lingered there. Suburban drama spreads faster than wildfire. My dad squared his shoulders. Let me speak to your son. I want him to look at me and tell me he stole a house from his employees' family. The woman's forehead creased slightly. She did not respond to the accusation hidden inside his words. Instead, she said, My son is not home right now, and he did not steal anything. He made a lawful purchase. My sister gasped, pushing past my mom as if proximity could force the truth to change. You do not understand. This house is my future, my new job, my stability. Sarah cannot do this to me. She cannot decide things like this without talking to us. She cannot. The woman tried again to gently press the door closed, but my dad planted his hand against it, holding it open with the determination of someone who refuses to accept reality. He leaned in close. I am telling you, one last time. We are here to take possession of this house. Our daughter said she would move out, so you need to step aside and let us in. The woman no longer looked sympathetic. She looked disappointed, perhaps even sad. I am telling you for the last time. This house belongs to my son, and you are trespassing. My mom hissed back. You old woman, you are helping a liar. She tricked us, and you helped her. You are hiding something. This whole thing stinks of manipulation. My sister stood behind them, silent now, her face pale, her fingers gripping the straps of her bag so hard her knuckles whitened. She did not defend the woman. She did not calm my parents. She did not step away. She simply watched, waiting for the universe to bend toward her desires one more time. The woman tried one last time to close the door. She pressed gently but firmly, lowering her voice. "Please leave." My dad forced it back open again. "No, not until we get our explanation. Not until we expose whatever you are trying to pull." And that was when the neighbor across the street finally called out in a cautious voice, "Is everything all right over there?" But my dad ignored her entirely. He kept his hand pressed against the door, his expression twisting into something I had seen many times, but had tried for years not to name. A sense of entitlement so deep it made him believe that ownership was not written on deeds or contracts, but in his expectations. The woman stood her ground, her voice thinning with strain. "You need to remove your hand from my door." But he did not. My mom stepped even closer, pointing a finger directly at the woman's chest. "You do not get to shut us out. Not until you tell us what you did with our daughter's home." Behind her, my sister finally whispered something, a small, shaking sound barely audible. She said, "This cannot be happening." And in that moment, with her words hanging in the humid Carolina air, the truth slid fully into view. They had never seen the house as mine. They had seen it as theirs. And now that it was gone, they wanted someone to blame. The woman on the porch held her breath and waited. The neighbors leaned forward. The movers shifted awkwardly by the truck, and my family kept their hands planted firmly on a door that no longer opened for them. Everything was set, every thread pulled tight. All that remained was the moment when the person who actually owned the house arrived home. But that part of the story had not happened yet. So the scene hung there, suspended, vibrating with tension, as the woman stood against a family who refused to hear the truth. And the door, caught between them, remained open only because my dad refused to release it. What happened next came to me later in fragments. A neighbor describing voices rising on a quiet street. The buyer's mother recounted the pressure of shoulders against her door. A police officer told me in a steady tone that the situation had escalated more quickly than anyone expected. I would piece it together slowly, the way someone puzzles through a dream they did not witness but somehow remember. My dad still had his hand pressed to the frame when a car rolled into the driveway. It was a dark blue sedan, freshly washed, the kind of car that did not draw attention but spoke of financial stability. The engine clicked softly as it shut off. My family barely reacted at first. They were too focused on fighting the reality standing in front of them. It was my mom who turned her head first, squinting into the sunlight. A young man stepped out. Late 20s maybe, early 30s at most. Tall, lean, wearing dark jeans and a simple gray shirt. He had the tired but deliberate posture of a person who worked long hours in a demanding job, but still tried to salvage a quiet weekend. He carried a paper grocery bag in one arm. A fresh loaf of bread poked out from the top. Nothing dramatic, nothing confrontational, just an ordinary arrival to what he believed was his home. He took 2 steps toward the porch before slowing. He saw the moving truck. He saw my dad's hand blocking his mother's door. He saw my mom's posture stiff and indignant. He saw my sister standing frozen behind them, like a shadow, waiting for someone to redraw the world the way she wanted it. Then his eyes moved to his mother. Her shoulders were braced but not rigid, her face composed yet strained. He said her name softly, not loudly, not in panic, but with the calm concern of someone who recognized when a situation needed steadying. She turned toward him, and something in her expression told him everything he needed to know. He set the grocery bag on the ground before walking up the steps. He did not rush. He did not shove. He simply stepped forward in a way that caused my dad to stiffen, and my mom too, recoil half an inch. "Is everything all right?" His voice was low, even, the kind of evenness that carried more authority than shouting ever could. My dad let out a harsh breath. "This woman is trying to keep us out of our daughter's house. She is involved in something fraudulent. She refuses to show us paperwork. She is hiding something." The young man blinked once. Then his gaze shifted to the doorframe, where my dad's hand still rested like a claim staked in metal. He looked at it for a long moment before lifting his eyes again. "Sir, you need to remove your hand from my property." My dad scoffed loudly. "Property. He said it like the word offended him. This house belongs to my family. My daughter promised her sister she could have it. We are here to move her in. This woman is lying to you. She is part of some scam. The young man listened. He did not laugh. He did not argue. He waited until my dad stopped speaking, which took longer than it should have. Then he spoke quietly. The house was purchased legally. I have the deed. You have no right to be here. My mom stepped forward with a tremor in her voice. We raised our daughter in this house. She would never do this to us. She has always been a good girl, but she has been confused lately. People take advantage of her, especially strangers. You manipulated her. I know you did. The young man studied her face as if searching for logic where none existed. He put one hand in his pocket in a gesture of restrained patience. Ma'am, your daughter contacted her attorney. She sold this house willingly. There was no manipulation. My sister finally found her voice, sharp with disbelief. Sarah would never sell this house. She knows I need it for my job. She knows our family depends on her. She knows what she owes us. The young man looked at her, not cruelly, just directly. Your sister does not owe you a house. Those words hit the porch with the weight of a falling brick. My sister's eyes widened, then narrowed with something approaching rage. You do not know anything about our family. She owes us everything. We sacrificed so much for her. She would never abandon us. She would never choose strangers over us. The young man remained still. His mother watched from the doorway, her shoulders rising slowly with each breath. The situation was changing, shifting like tension before a storm. My dad pointed a finger at the young man. I am telling you right now, this is illegal. All of it. You bought this house behind our backs. You took advantage of our daughter. You have no idea who you are dealing with. The young man's jaw tightened. His voice lost its softness. Sir, step away from my door. My dad refused. He held the frame as if letting go meant losing some final tether to control. My mom drew closer beside him, clutching my sister's arm. My sister clutched tighter to her bag, her eyes darting wildly, as if searching for the version of reality she preferred. The young man exhaled through his nose. Then he took out his phone. I am calling the police. His tone did not rise. It did not tremble. It was simply factual. My mom gasped. You cannot do that. We are not criminals. We are here for what is ours. His thumb moved across the phone screen. You are trespassing. You have been asked repeatedly to leave. Since you refuse, I am calling the police. My dad laughed, but it came out more like a bark. Good. Call them. We will tell them everything. We will tell them how you stole from our daughter, how you tricked her, how you preyed on her. The young man paused with the phone near his ear. He looked at my dad for a long second. Then he said quietly, It seems you do not understand how property law works. My dad opened his mouth to respond, but a dispatcher had already answered. The young man gave the address, the description of the trespass, the escalation risk, the refusal to leave. His voice stayed calm the entire time. When he hung up, he put the phone back in his pocket with a slow, deliberate movement. My mom's face crumpled. You called the police on us. On a family. How heartless are you? He looked at her without flinching. You backed a woman in her 60s into her own home. You refused to let her shut her front door. You are threatening us on private property. That is not heartless. That is trespassing. My dad puffed out his chest. We will not move an inch. Not until our daughter explains this to us. The young man nodded once. Then you can tell that to the officers when they arrive. The neighborhood had fully awakened by then. Doors opened, curtains shifted. People gathered at safe distances, pretending to water gardens or adjust porch decorations. The drama had become a spectacle. 5 minutes passed. My parents and sister stood their ground, their belongings stacked behind them like a fortress made of denial. Entitlement. The movers lingered awkwardly near the truck, clearly debating whether to stay or leave. The young man stood silently by the steps with his arms loosely at his sides, his mother behind him inside the doorway. When the first police car turned onto Maple Crest Drive, my sister whispered something that no one else heard. Her lips barely moved, her shoulders sagged. 2 officers exited the vehicle, calm, measured, prepared for anything. The young man walked down to speak with them first, greeting them with a nod. They asked questions. He answered. They took notes. Then they walked up the steps to my parents. "Is there a problem here?" My dad seized the moment. "Yes, a serious one. This man bought our daughter's house without her consent. We have been trying to get answers. His mother is blocking us. This is a misunderstanding. We need your help to fix it." The officer listened, expression neutral. Then he asked, "Sir, were you invited onto this property by the current owner?" My dad hesitated. He was not expecting that question. "We were invited by our daughter. This is her home. Or it was supposed to be." The officer nodded once. "But did the current legal owner invite you to be here today?" My dad's jaw flexed. He did not answer. The officer repeated the question. "Sir, did the owner invite you?" My mom jumped in. "The owner should be our daughter. This man deceived her. He took something that did not belong to him. This is all a scheme." The officer turned to the young man. "Do you have documentation proving ownership?" The young man nodded and handed over a set of papers from a folder he had retrieved from his car. The officer examined the documents carefully. He nodded again. Then he faced my family. "According to this, the property belongs to this gentleman, not your daughter. He has asked you to leave several times. You are required to comply." My dad's face reddened. "You cannot expect us to walk away from our daughter's house without any explanation. We deserve answers." The officer held firm. "Sir, if you do not leave voluntarily, you may be charged with trespassing," my sister whispered weakly. "This was supposed to be mine." The officer maintained his composure. "That may be something you need to take up with your sister, but it is not something we can resolve. You cannot remain here." My dad opened his mouth again, but the second officer stepped forward slightly. It was not aggressive. It was simply a reminder that reality was no longer negotiable. My mom grabbed my sister's hand. Her voice broke into a sharp plea. "Please, do not make us leave like this. We have been through so much." This was supposed to be a new beginning. The young man answered gently but firmly. "I am sorry, but you need to go." My dad stared at him with disbelief, then anger, then something like defeat. Slowly, reluctantly, he pulled his hand away from the doorframe. My mom's shoulders slumped. My sister wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, though no tears fell. The officers escorted them down the steps. The movers climbed back into their truck. My parents got into their car. My sister hesitated for a long second, looking back at the house as if she still expected it to open for her. It did not. They drove away. The street exhaled. The young man spoke quietly with the officers for another minute. His mother stood beside him now, her hand lightly touching his arm. When the police cars finally left, he retrieved the grocery bag from where he had set it down. The loaf of bread had rolled halfway out, but he tucked it back gently. Inside their home, they shut the door without further ceremony. Later that afternoon, as the sunlight faded over my small apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a number I recognized. I answered. A calm voice said, "Everything is handled," and the line went quiet. "Everything is handled." That was all he said before the line went silent. No explanation, no emotion. Nothing added or softened. Just those 3 words, spoken in a tone so steady, it almost felt like closure. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear long after he hung up, listening to the muted hum of my apartment refrigerator, waiting for the rest of the world to make sense again. It did not. Not immediately. Instead, the quiet stretched out around me, thick and unfamiliar. For the first time in years, I realized there was nothing left for me to fix. No one is calling for a favor. No crisis I needed to absorb. No emergency payment that demanded my paycheck before I even earned it. Just silence. It was almost disorienting, but silence never lasts long in my family. It always breaks under the weight of chaos. The next morning, I woke to 8 missed calls from my sister, then 6 more from my mom. My dad had sent a long text filled with jagged sentences and accusations that blurred together when I tried to read them. I did not reply, not because I wanted to punish anyone. I simply had nothing left to give. I made coffee and tried to settle my mind. The simplicity of stirring cream into the mug felt like the first normal thing I had done in weeks. I sat at my tiny kitchen table with the blinds half open, the morning light filtering in and settling across the laminate surface. That was when my phone lit up again. My phone lit up with Mark's name. For a second, I wondered why he was calling again, especially this late. I answered anyway, pressing the phone to my ear. Hello. His voice came through steady and familiar. It is Mark. I straightened in my chair. I had expected maybe a follow-up from his mother, or possibly a question about utilities, or some stray piece of mail, but not him directly. I said quietly, "Yes, of course. Thank you for calling." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just deliberate. I thought you should know. There was more to what happened yesterday. I waited. He had a way of speaking that did not rush. Words landed cleanly, like he was laying out documents one page at a time. Your family's behavior went beyond trespassing. There were accusations, threats, unfounded claims about manipulation. These statements were made in front of neighbors, in front of officers. It has implications. My stomach tightened. I pictured my dad, face red, shouting as if volume alone could rewrite the law. I pictured my mom pushing past boundaries that were never hers to cross. I pictured my sister clinging to her story like it could rescue her from consequences. I said nothing yet. He continued. I did not want to escalate things further, but when your father claimed I pressured your sister and took advantage of her, I had no choice. A soft ringing began in my ears. I closed my eyes. He went on. I had to file an internal report. Her name came up in their statements repeatedly. It was unavoidable. I opened my eyes slowly. Internal report. The words hung there for a moment before meaning clicked into place with startling clarity. I said carefully, "You mean at your workplace?" Another pause. Yes. I pressed my palm flat against the table. My voice came out steady, though the inside of me tilted slightly. "And what is your position there?" I could almost hear the corner of his mouth lift, not in amusement, but in something like recognition, a quiet acceptance that I had arrived at the answer on my own. I am the Chief Executive Officer. For a second, the world went still. I could not speak. Could not inhale. My mind tried to stretch around the information like a too small sweater, forced over a larger truth. The buyer. The calm voice at the porch. The man who watched my family unravel on property he had purchased legally. The man who called the police only after every reasonable request had been refused. My sister's boss, I finally said, barely above a whisper. She works for you. Yes. She does. A long beat followed. My heart thudded gently, not with fear, but with the weight of inevitability. Because in that one moment, everything that had happened on Maple Crest Drive shifted into alignment. It was not personal revenge. It was not orchestrated. It was not some cosmic twist designed for dramatic storytelling. It was simply the system doing what it does. A chain reaction built from choices. Her choices. Their choices. Mine, he continued. An HR investigation has been opened. I did not request anything specific. I only submitted what was necessary. The rest is up to them. My fingers curled around the edge of the table. I asked quietly, "Will she lose her job?" He took a breath. I cannot decide that personally. It is handled through our internal process. But the conduct on record is serious. Trespassing. Harassment, false accusations involving the company. It will likely affect her status. I swallowed, absorbing his words. It was not satisfaction that washed through me. Not vindication. Something colder. Something finite. The kind of clarity that comes only when the last piece of a puzzle drops into place. He added, "This is not about punishing anyone. It is simply a procedure." I nodded even though he could not see me. "Thank you for telling me." Another pause, but softer than before. "You did nothing wrong." I closed my eyes briefly. It struck me how unusual it felt to hear those words from someone who had no reason to offer comfort. He was not part of my life. He did not know my years of carrying burdens that were never mine. But he had watched enough in a single afternoon to understand something most people never see. He wrapped up the call with the same calm tone he had begun with. "I just wanted you to be aware. If anything else changes, you will be notified." "Thank you," I repeated quietly. We ended the call. I sat back in my chair and let everything settle. My coffee had gone cold. I held it anyway, letting the warmth slowly fade from the mug, like the last remnants of shock, dissolving into understanding. The system is moving now, not because I had asked it to, not because anyone owed me justice, but because boundaries existed, and when someone crossed them loudly enough, consequences followed. Later that afternoon, I received the next round of fallout. My sister's number lit up my phone again. Then again. Then again. I did not answer. Eventually, she left a voicemail. Her voice had lost that breathless entitlement, that certainty the world would always bend for her. It sounded strained, fractured. Her message came through in rushed fragments. Something is happening at work. HR called me in. They said there was a report. They said witnesses saw everything. They said my job is under review. This is your fault. You did this to me. How could you? I listened to the message twice, not out of cruelty, out of disbelief. Even in a crisis, she could not see the line between what she had caused and what she believed she deserved. An hour later, my mom texted. Just one sentence. "What did you do to your sister?" I set the phone aside and walked to the window, letting the light filter across my face. The sky outside was fading into soft pink, the kind of evening that felt almost apologetic in its beauty. I did not reply. The following day, the buyer called again. His tone was as steady as before. "Your sister has been placed on administrative leave." I nodded to myself. HR has completed their initial review, he continued. The decision is not final, but the circumstances are serious. I asked quietly, "What exactly did she say?" He answered plainly. "She claimed I coerced you. She stated publicly that this home was promised to her. She insisted she had legal rights to enter. She accused my mother of harassment. All of it was disproven on site." I closed my eyes. I could imagine her doing that, not because she was malicious, but because reality had always felt negotiable to her. If she said something with enough force, she thought the world would bend to keep up. He said one more thing. Her file already had documented concerns from before I arrived at the company. This incident simply triggered the review process. In other words, the house was never the tipping point. It was the flashlight revealing cracks that had already been spreading. I thanked him again. He did not linger. He simply said, "You deserved the truth, and now you have it." After we hung up, I stood in the quiet of my apartment and let the truth settle. Karma was not loud. It was not vengeful. It did not shout or slam doors or demand applause. It simply arrived when the circumstances aligned, steady and impartial. No one needed to lift a hand. No one needed to orchestrate revenge. The system moved on its own. Within 3 days, the final message arrived. Not from him. Not from HR. Not from my parents. From my sister. Her voice cracked through the voicemail. They fired me. They said conduct. They said behavior. They said I made the company look irresponsible. You destroyed my life. You took my house, and then you took my job. I hope you are happy. I listened to the message one time. Then I deleted it. Because the truth was simple. I had taken nothing from her. The house had always been mine. The job had always been hers to keep or lose. The consequences belonged to her, not me. That evening, I sat on my small couch and let the weight of everything finally lift. Not quickly, not joyfully, just a steady loosening of tension that had lived in my bones for too many years. My family had always believed that I existed to catch them when they fell, but karma had a different view. When people push hard enough against boundaries that were never theirs to cross, they eventually meet the edge. By the end of that week, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not triumph, something quieter, something cleaner. Freedom. Pure and uncomplicated, the kind that did not need to be announced. It simply settled in and made itself at home. And for the first time, I let it. In the days that followed, the quiet inside my apartment took on a different texture. It no longer felt like the silence after a storm. It felt like the silence before the beginning. A clean one. Steady and unhurried. I woke up early one morning and realized I had slept through the night without waking even once. No heart pounding at 3 a.m. No dread curling under my ribs. just sleep. The kind that held me without tightening its grip. I made oatmeal on the stove, the simple kind with cinnamon and a handful of blueberries. I ate it slowly, letting each spoonful warm my chest. It was strange how soothing a plain breakfast could be when not eaten between crisis calls or financial panic. When I finished, I washed the bowl and set it on the rack to dry. A small thing, but it felt like a quiet reclaiming of myself. My phone stayed still on the counter. No missed calls, no rapid-fire texts. No emotional demands disguised as questions. For the first time in a long while, the absence did not ache. It settled. My parents did not call again. Not after the incident at the house. Not after my sister lost her job. Not after their accusations fell flat against the reality they tried to twist. They withdrew into their own embarrassment, or anger, or whatever story they needed to tell themselves to avoid the truth. Either way, their silence became constant. Holidays came and went. The kind of holidays where families gather at long tables or on familiar couches. But my phone remained quiet. No invitation to Thanksgiving dinner. No Christmas card. No text asking if I would bring dessert. At first, I braced for the sadness I thought might come, but it never arrived in the way I expected. Instead, what came was space. A clean, open space where obligation used to be. I had spent most of my life believing that the loss of family would feel like a wound. Instead, it felt like removing something that had grown too heavy to carry. A backpack full of rocks I had mistaken for necessities. Once it was off my shoulders, I realized how long I had been hunched from the weight. My sister kept trying a little longer than my parents. A few short texts slipped in during the first week of her unemployment, each one a different version of blame. Then a long silence. Then a message that simply said, "You abandoned us." I looked at the words for a long time, not because they hurt, but because they did not. I typed nothing. I let the message sit on the screen until the phone dimmed and the world around me felt steady again. Losing them did not happen in one moment. It was a gradual loosening, a slow release of threads that had been knotted too tightly for too long. The unraveling felt less like a loss and more like clarity. Of course, there were moments when memory tried to pull me back. Small moments. The smell of lemon in a grocery aisle reminded me of my grandma's kitchen. The hum of a lawnmower drifting through an open window, echoing summer mornings when my dad insisted we all contribute to the yard work. A phone ringing on television sounding too close to the tones my mom used to call me at odd hours. But none of these memories asked me to return. They simply existed, soft at the edges, free of obligation. What I gained in their absence was subtle, almost invisible at first. I kept my evenings. I could make dinner without checking my bank account 3 times to see what unexpected expense might drain it next. I could sit on my couch and read a book without listening to the sound of my phone vibrating with crisis. I kept my mornings. Slow ones, gentle ones. I woke without bracing for messages filled with guilt or demands or disappointment. I woke without scanning the day for emotional landmines. I woke, breathed, and moved into the day without pressure. I kept my sleep, my deep, unbroken sleep, the kind people talk about in commercials, but that I had not felt in years. Sleep without worry gnawing at the edges. Sleep that let my body sink instead of brace. I kept my money, not an enormous amount, not enough to change the world, but mine. All mine. For the first time since my 20s, every dollar I earned served my actual life, my actual needs. Not the emergencies of grown adults who believed their comfort was my responsibility. My checking account became a simple thing, no longer a lifeline stretched thin and fraying. I kept my breath. My lungs felt larger somehow, as if the air had more room to move in and out, as if the constant tightening around my ribs had finally relaxed. Healing did not come in dramatic revelations or long talks with wise mentors. It did not come from inspirational quotes or tearful breakthroughs. It arrived in the life I built on small, steady choices. On Tuesdays, I started walking after work. Just around the block at first, then farther. I listened to the crunch of gravel under my shoes. I noticed the way the light fell through the branches at dusk. No one called during those walks. The quiet felt like company. On Fridays, I tried new recipes. I burned a few. I perfected a handful. I let myself enjoy the process without rushing. No one was waiting for me to finish quickly so I could drive across town to solve their problems. On Sunday, I cleaned my apartment while music played softly in the background, not out of obligation or performance, simply because the order made me feel calm. I folded the laundry slowly. I reorganized my drawer of spices. I opened the windows and let fresh air settle across my furniture. There were days when loneliness brushed against me, not harshly, but honestly. Days when I realized that choosing peace sometimes meant choosing solitude. But solitude felt gentler than sacrifice. It felt like a space where something new could grow. I did not replace my family with new people. I did not rush out to make friendships or join clubs or build an alternate support system to fill the gaps. I let the gaps exist. I learned that emptiness is not always something to fear. Sometimes it is just a place waiting to be understood. A month after the house incident, one of my neighbors from Maple Crest Drive sent me a card. Inside it was a simple note written in looping handwriting. Just wanted you to know you made the right choice. Your family was loud enough for the entire street to hear. I hope you are well. I smiled at the card and tucked it into a drawer. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that strangers sometimes see the truth more clearly than those closest to us. Another week passed, then another. My sister did not call again. My parents stopped sending messages. Their absence settled into its own rhythm. The holidays came around once more. I bought myself a small artificial tree from a discount store and decorated it with a gold ribbon. I made hot chocolate and watched the lights blink. There was no ache in it, just quiet. One morning, I woke early and stepped out onto my apartment balcony. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine from the wooded area behind the building. The sunrise stretched across the horizon in muted pinks and soft gold. I wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee and watched the light change for reason. Other than it felt good to witness something gentle. What I lost was not family. Not exactly. What I lost was the version of them I kept trying to save. The version I constructed in my mind whenever the truth felt too heavy to name. I had held on to the hope that someday they would see me, not for what I provided, but for who I was. Letting go of that hope felt like losing something precious. But it also felt like stepping out of a shadow I had mistaken for home. What I kept was myself. A self I had not known in a long time. A self who was not drained, not cornered, not stretched thin to the point of tearing. A self who could breathe. Toward the end of the season, I received one last message from my dad. It was short, not angry, not apologetic either, just a plain line of text. We need time. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down. Maybe they did need time. Maybe they needed distance to see what they had expected from me all those years. Maybe they would never see it. But for the first time, their timeline was not mine to manage. I finished my coffee and washed the mug. I placed it upside down on the rack next to the oatmeal bowl. Small acts of stillness became the structure of my days. The world did not collapse without them. I did not collapse without them. Instead, life stretched open quietly, like a book finding its next page. I kept walking. I kept cooking. I kept sleeping deeply. I kept breathing easily. And though I did not know what would come next or how the future would shape itself, I knew one thing with unshakable clarity. I finally had enough room to live. That truth settled into me quietly, the way morning light settles across a hardwood floor. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just steadily, until it became the new shape of my days. Weeks passed in a rhythm that felt steady and honest. I went to work. I cooked for myself. I slept deeply. I walked through my neighborhood with no destination except forward. Life became simple in a way I had forgotten was possible. Then my phone rang again. It was late on a Thursday evening, the kind of evening where the world feels softened at the edges. I had just finished washing a few dishes and was letting them air dry on the counter. The ringtone cut through the quiet like a small crack in the calm I had built. I looked at the caller ID. My dad. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My first instinct was to let it ring, but something inside me nudged gently. Not an obligation, not fear, just a sense that the circle needed closing. I answered. His breath came through first, uneven. Then his voice followed, rough and slightly hoarse. "We need to talk." I leaned against the counter, letting my shoulder rest against the cabinet. "About what?" A long pause stretched between us. When he finally spoke, his words were slower than I expected. "Your sister is not doing well. She cannot find another job. She is angry. Your mother is upset. Everything has fallen apart." He swallowed. This was never supposed to happen. I let the silence absorb his confession. For years, I had been the net catching every fall, every bad decision, every bill, every crisis. Now he was standing in the hollow left behind when I stepped out of them. Pattern. He continued. "You could have prevented this. If you had just given her the house. If you had just helped. We were counting on you. You know that." I exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale you release when you finally decide you are done carrying something heavy. I said quietly, "I did help. For years." He pushed back immediately. "That is not the same. The family supports each other. The family stays together. Family sacrifices." I closed my eyes. "No. What you mean is that I was supposed to sacrifice, constantly, quietly, without being asked, without being thanked, without ever needing anything in return." He said nothing. I kept going, not harshly, not angrily, just steadily. I bought my own house. I paid my own bills. I handled my own life. And every time I made progress, you treated it like an asset to redistribute. You never asked what it cost me. You never wondered whether I could keep carrying the weight. You only asked how much more I could give. His breath caught. That is not true. But it was true. In every pattern, every demand, every unspoken rule. I heard my own voice steadying itself, as if finally naming the truth gave it structure. You did not want someone to bail everyone out. Someone who would never say no. He flinched. I could hear it in the way his breath shifted. "You are being dramatic." I shook my head even though he could not see it. "No, I am being accurate." Another long silence followed. Then he said, quieter now, "You hurt this family." It surprised me how gently the next words came out. "No, I just stopped being your safety net." The line went silent. Not dropped. Not disconnected, just silent. Like he was finally hearing something he had never allowed himself to hear. When he did speak, his voice was thin. "So this is it. You are walking away." I looked around my small apartment. The soft lamplight, the clean counter, the quiet that was mine. I felt the answer settle into my bones. I said, "I am choosing myself. That is not walking away. That is standing where I should have been all along." He inhaled sharply. "And your sister? What happens to her?" I felt something soften inside me. No pity, just a quiet understanding of what was and what was not mine to hold. She will stand where she chooses to stand, just like I had to. His voice rose again, the old tone, the familiar accusation. "You think you are better than us," I answered simply. "No, I just finally understand what I am not." He did not reply. I let the silence settle. Then I said, "Take care of yourselves." And I ended the call. It was not dramatic. It did not thunder through my apartment. It felt more like setting something down gently, something heavy that I had carried for far too long. Afterward, I went to my cell phone provider the next day and changed my number. The representative at the store asked if I wanted to keep my contacts transferred. I told him no. The clean slate felt necessary. He nodded like he understood more than I was explaining. When I walked out of the store, I felt lighter, not because my family no longer had my number, but because I had finally chosen the boundary I needed. A real one, a final one. I deleted old voicemails, old texts, old threads filled with guilt and obligation. Each deletion felt like sweeping away dust that had settled over years of neglecting myself. Days passed with no interruptions, no chaos. The world grew quieter inside me and around me. I began waking up without checking my phone at all. I began ending my days without rehearsing conversations that would never change. One evening, about a month later, I found myself sitting on my balcony again. The sun was lowering itself behind the trees, painting the sky in soft reds and lingering gold. I watched the light fade and felt something settle inside me that I could only describe as peace. Real peace. The kind that does not come from winning or proving anything, but from letting go. Inside my apartment, life became meaningful in small ways. I bought a plant and kept it alive for the first time. I tried a new recipe that came out terrible, but made me laugh. I donated a box of old belongings that carried more weight in memory than on purpose. I rearranged my living room furniture just enough to give the space a new feeling. Healing did not show up like a revelation. It showed up when I realized I no longer braced for my phone to ring. When I no longer stepped into each day preparing myself for someone else's crisis. When I no longer carried the invisible ledger of debts I never owed. My family faded from daily thought. Not erased, not hated, just quiet. A chapter closed. One morning, while tying my shoes for a walk, I remembered something my grandma once told me when I was very young. She said that some families expect love to be a debt instead of a gift. At the time, I did not understand. Now the understanding sat gently inside me. Not sharp, not bitter, just true. What I had lost was the illusion that I ever belonged to them in the way a daughter should. What I had kept was something far more important. Myself. Late one afternoon, while standing in line at a coffee shop, the final words of this chapter formed themselves without effort. I was never your daughter. I was your unpaid insurance policy. And somehow, finally saying it to myself made everything align. When I went home that day, I opened my living room windows to let the late breeze drift in. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and something sweet carried from a neighboring apartment. I felt the stillness again. The good kind, the kind that leaves room for a life to grow. I sat down with my laptop and let out a breath that felt like freedom. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.